Coming up today on Uncommon Sense, join me as I interview Thomas Finke, a Latin teacher at a Chesterton Academy and the writer of the Latin curriculum for all the Chesterton Academies. Hello and welcome to Uncommon Sense, the official podcast of the Society of Gilbert Keith Chesterton. I'm Grettelyn Darkey, your host, and I'm happy to be joined today by Tom Finke. Hi, Tom. How are you?
Doing great, Grettelyn. How are you?
Great. Thank you. So happy you could join me today.
Yeah.
As some of you might have seen Tom's wife, Jen, on the podcast before. She works for the Society on the society side, really, and is a great help to us. And it's great to finally meet her other half. So why don't you, if you don't mind, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, Tom?
Yeah, sure. So I guess my introduction both to the classics and to Chesterton, the man himself, was when I was in high school. I went to a classical high school in Cincinnati named for St. Edmund Campion. And there, I took Latin and Greek for all 4 years in high school, as well as, it was a classical education, and we had a couple great teachers, Matt Swaim and Mrs. Bussey, who were introduced me to Chesterton. We had a class in our theology and philosophy class where we did the ethics of Elfland from Orthodoxy. And I think it was that kind of sparked my interest. By the time I'd finished high school, I had read all of Orthodoxy on my own, I think twice.
Wow.
I found a complete works of all the Father Brown mysteries. I read all those. It was, I think, close to 1,000 pages.
Those are addictive.
They are. Yeah, it was pretty easy to go through all of them pretty quickly. But a few of the other novels, Man Who Was Thursday, Club of Queer Trades, The Man Who Knew Too Much.
I love that one.
As well as a few books of essays as well. So I just kind of ran through all of those, studied classics in college, and then a few years after that, I was teaching at my old high school, and my wife Jen and I, who you mentioned, we attended the Chesterton Conference in Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania, and met Dale Ahlquist and Emily de Rotstein and a lot of the people involved in all the things. And just kind of had in the back of my head, it's like, that heard about the schools and the schools network and thought that this would be a really neat possible job opportunity. And then everything kind of fell into place in God's timing. And we moved up here to the Twin Cities in 2018, and I've been teaching here at the school since for the last 6 years.
Wow, that's great. So it's really been like, it's cool because I know a lot of we have some really awesome teachers throughout the network, but not all of them kind of came to Chesterton first. So it's great to hear a story of one who did. That's really cool. And what an impressive high school education with the classics like that. So have you just been interested in the classics since then, or classical languages, I guess I should say, since then? Was it a continuous thing, or did you just get back to it when you started teaching here?
Yeah, no, it really was. I had an interest in grade school. I was homeschooled, and so I read a lot of. I was always interested in the history of Rome, I guess, even more so than the language. And then, but the two, of course, go hand in hand. And so I had read books on my own about that. And then by the time I was a senior in high school, and I was really getting into the heart of Latin, and I was really enjoying those classes and diving deep into the Latin texts. And so I was applying to colleges, and I was pretty good at math. And so I was applying for engineering schools, but also Latin at the same time. trying to make that decision, between something that I really enjoyed doing and something that made money. And so
Yes.
I chose money. No.
It's hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a hard choice.
Yeah. But, no, I went to the Xavier University in Cincinnati. They have it's not taking new students now, but they had a classical languages program, and it was really great. And then, I've been teaching Latin for ever since then, but some other stuff along the way as well. Yeah.
So what's it like teaching like Latin? I know that a lot of people say when they teach a language, they sort of learn it better themselves. Did you
Yeah.
find that to be true?
Yes.
Short answer, right?
Yeah. No, for sure. Like you have to know it inside and out. And I've come up with some of my own ways of teaching it that I think help the students see it better, kind of can approach it in a different way that can be really helpful.
Are there any
Yeah.
instances of that you could think of that you want to share?
Um,
Sorry to put you on the spot.
no, that's okay. Trying to think of anything specific. I think just what I like most is just the opportunity to just continually go back and dive into the text. Some of the texts that I've done half dozen times or more now, and just see them again and kind of see new ways in which they speak to me that time that I'm reading it.
Yeah, and I'm sure the students kind of bring new things out for you too, which
Yeah,
is
yeah,
so exciting.
it really is. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, let's just transition into kind of the big topic then. So you've been helping to write the Latin curriculum, which is a huge project.
It is. Yeah.
It's daily lesson plans, right? That's
Yeah.
so intense.
Yeah. So the idea behind those is that, there's, as you mentioned, right, we're having 60 total Chesterton schools in the fall this next coming school year. And, you know, as these schools are looking for teachers, with varying degrees of background, not everyone coming in is an experienced teacher. Not everyone is, who's going to be teaching Latin is a class assistant in vocation, but enough to help in there. So the goal of the curriculum project then is to have, as you said, the daily lesson plans, so that they have the framework in place that they can kind of work from and piece through, really as an aid, especially for new teachers or new to the subject, so they can get through that without being overwhelmed. Because in a small school, these teachers are often teaching 3, 4, 6 different classes at once, and preparing each day for all that can be daunting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing that you're doing. I've also heard that it can be easy to kind of go down rabbit holes sometimes, and this is sort of to help with that too.
Yeah, for sure. Like it can definitely be, if you're not focused on, how on the end goal and how long it's going to take to get there, it can be easy to spend too much time in one area and not have enough time at the end of the year, for sure.
Yeah, and there's so much that's interesting, and the way that things are taught at Chesterton, I know it's discussion based, so a lot of it would be easy to just really pick apart something for a long time. I
Yeah,
think I would be
yeah.
tempted to do that. No, but that's wonderful. So what's it been like working on those day-to-day lesson plans? Do you draw a lot from your experience, I assume?
Yeah, mostly experience. We use the Henley series books.
Mm,
Father Henley was a Jesuit, and he wrote the books in the 40s.
mm,
So we use those for our first 2 years of Latin studies, so freshman and sophomore years. So um, I I really enjoy the books. I think they're really good to teach from, but they're not always user friendly if you don't have a Latin background. So
mm,
yeah, part of what I'm doing in writing the lesson plans is kind of explaining how to go deeper into what he has
mm.
in a way of explaining them. So they have lots of great exercises for the students to use and get their practice and the hands on with text. so they can practice with it and understand it, but not as much for the teacher to kind of work from if you don't have that background.
Sure. Yeah. So you said so do they translate, just for my own curiosity?
Yeah.
I'm assuming, first year is pretty basic, but like, do you start reading, the real classics like Cicero, and Ovid? Do you start reading those sooner, or like what's the schedule look like? Just
Yeah. So, I mean, we do have a huge varied background of students coming in, right? So we have students
mm-hmm.
who have never had any Latin, and some students who have, taken 5 or 6 years of it in grade school. Um, so we've kind of played around with that a little bit, but we kind of seems to work best is just start everyone together back at the beginning,
Mm.
because unless, you have all of the students coming from the same school, they're
Mm.
even kids that have had Latin before, it doesn't always work to lump them in together. And it's good to have a common review, and even if it's easier for the other ones. But the first year, I mean, it's starting from the beginning, but it's very intense, because we're trying, if I had to quantify it, I'd say probably 75 to 80% of all the grammar we're trying to cover in that first year. So just
Wow.
building up a really fast foundation, I guess, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
but not letting it get too weak either, right? So that
Mm-hmm.
compromise between going through everything enough, but building it up enough that they can do that. So we go over, all the primary noun uses, all the primary verb uses, freshman year.
Mm.
And then sophomore year, a lot of reviews. So like strengthening that foundation in the first
Mm-hmm.
semester. But then the, second quarter into the second semester, adding new things. So things that they haven't seen yet, but because of the foundation, it's not as much memorization. It's a lot more kind of
Sure.
application, little the irregular things that come in.
Mm-hmm.
And then third quarter into fourth quarter, the goal is to read selections from Caesar's Gallic Wars.
Oh, nice.
So
Okay.
yeah, so by the end of sophomore year, they're getting some text written by a dead Roman.
I have not gotten to read the Gallic Wars, but I've heard they're actually quite a bit of fun.
Yeah,
Yeah, pretty exciting.
and yeah, it's interesting reading them. Caesar's always talking about himself in the third person. Like you have to remind them that
Mm-hmm.
he's really talking about himself here, and you
Mm-hmm.
know doing this to make himself sound better and things like that. Yeah,
Yep.
and then here in the Twin Cities, juniors and seniors, they can either elect to continue with Latin 3 and 4, but we also offer Italian and Spanish. So all the
Mm.
freshmen, all the sophomores take Latin, but then juniors and seniors, they kind of can split off. So for our Latin 3 and Latin 4 curriculum, as you kind of said, that's where we really dive deep into the Latin authors themselves. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, junior year, we're reading Cicero, as you mentioned, um, some selections from St. Augustine's Confessions,
Mm-hmm.
the poet Catullus.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the big ones.
Yeah.
And then senior year, we're reading the historian Livy, some
Mm-hmm.
St. Thomas Aquinas, both hymns and some Summa
Mm.
articles. Um, right now, we're working on Hildegard of Bingen, one of the
Oh,
more
nice.
recent doctors of the church,
Yeah.
and then finish out senior year with a good dive into Virgil's Aeneid.
Mm.
So
Fun.
yeah, so
Yeah.
they get 2 really solid years of practice reading primary texts, and those classes are almost more like a literature class than dealing with the memorizing endings and things.
Yeah, that's the the annoying part.
Yeah.
I took a minor in Latin in college, and oh man, I remember diagramming Cicero
Mm.
sentences. It was something else. But yeah, it was fun. And then maybe senior year, I think I took Latin hymns, and I remember thinking, this is so easy.
Yeah.
Because when you've been through some of the older authors, the
Hmm.
medieval church Latin is actually simpler.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. but not less beautiful, but definitely simpler.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great survey. Do you see a lot of students actually go through and do the extra 2 years of Latin, or do most of them branch off and do other languages?
It kind of ebbs and flows. I think the last few years we've seen, I'd say about a third stick with
Mm.
Latin. So
That's not bad.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, I'm happy with it. And I wish they would all stick with it, but at the same time, I like the small class size too.
Yeah.
It's nice being able to have the discussions with a more intimate group.
Cool. So for our listeners who aren't really aware of the Chesterton Academies as a whole, one of the unique things is the integrative approach. You know, the fact that the Latin that you read with them is going to correspond with their history classes and correspond with, their all the other classes that they're engaged in. So, what are some of those overlaps that you've noticed, and how does that affect your students and your class and the whole dynamic?
Um, yeah, I mean the integrated curriculum is great. It's almost harder and easier at the same time to work it in.
Mm,
Um, a lot of the integration occurs, where they're doing, in the freshman year they're focusing on the ancient world. Well,
mm,
obviously that's kind of a direct connection there. Um, but then as they go up, the medieval world, the Renaissance world, the modern world, um, harder to find kind of direct
sure.
historical connections as much. Um, but there's still some. But at the same time, I think where the integration occurs is that you can't understand a lot of these concepts without understanding the language.
Mm,
Um, and so what we're giving them in the Latin curriculum is as I like to put it, the vocabulary of thought, right? So
mm,
the words that we talk about in philosophy and history, a lot of them are so influenced by Latin that you can't understand them without understanding the language. So it's and every teacher thinks that his subject is the most important, of course, but I think that you can't have a classical education without Latin because it's
mm,
the language that lets you understand everything else about it.
mm,
Yeah,
mm. Truly.
and yeah, I was I did find something from the man himself I wanted to share that kind of
Oh,
fits in
please.
here. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
from the essay "Some of Our Errors in the Thing," 1929. Chesterton says, "When we translate things into English, they often only serve as a luminous argument for leaving them in Latin. Latin is Latin and always says exactly what it means.
Mm-hmm.
I will venture to take one example about which I feel very strongly. Will somebody with better authority than I have announce in a voice of thunder, through a trumpet or with a salute of big guns, the vital and very much needed truth that dulcis is not the Latin for sweet? Sweet is not the English word for dulcis. It has a totally different connotation and atmosphere.
Mm,
Dulce et decorum est pro patria mori does not mean it's sweet and decorous to die for our country. It means something untranslatable, like everything that means anything.
mm,
It's a question between a dead language and a dying language. Every living language is a dying language, even if it does not die. Parts of it are perpetually perishing or changing their sense. There is only one escape from that flux. A language must die to be immortal."
mm. Oh, I love that. That's great.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's the idea, of course, that I've been trying to communicate for months, and uh, finally, find the words from it in Chesterton himself, of course. But
Of
that
course.
idea yeah, that idea that one of the primary reasons why we teach Latin is because you can never encapsulate everything in a translation. There's
Mm-hmm.
something that's always missing, and you can't fully understand these ideas without understanding the language they're written in.
Mm, beautiful. Yeah, I love that. The whole idea of a language just dying continually is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, especially in our fast-paced world, I think English is changing so fast all the time.
Hmm.
I don't even
Yep.
understand
Yeah.
what some of the Gen Z kids mean when they say things.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, that's really amazing. And of course, it's also the official language of the church, and therefore is continuous no matter what.
Yep.
Yeah, beautiful, very beautiful. Hmm, cool. Well, any fun anecdotes about Latin class you want to share? And,
Let's see. Yeah, I think that's kind of the big thing, as we're kind of talking. What I really like doing with the senior class, especially, is they've had 4 years, 3.5 years now, and so what I really have fun discussing with them is trying to look at things that they're very familiar with in translation
mm,
and show them where it is in Latin, and then discussing, it's like, is this really saying the same thing?
mm,
Maybe two examples. In the fall, right around Thanksgiving, we usually do Saint Thomas Aquinas's poem, hymn Adoro Te Devote,
mm-hmm,
and of course there's the beautiful translation and poetic adaptation by Gerard Manley Hopkins,
mm-hmm,
Godhead Here in Hiding. And I love Hopkins.
mm.
I love his poems. And he does a
Yes.
really great job translating that,
Mm,
and gets lots of it in there. I say it takes a poet in his own right to translate a poem,
mm-hmm.
and so he does a beautiful job with it. But we look at it in Latin, and you translate the Latin into English, and it just falls flat on its face as far
Mm-hmm.
as just a basic prose translation. But um, I try to get him to realize, Hopkins does it beautifully, but what is in the Latin that Hopkins couldn't bring over?
Yeah.
And there's some definite, phrases and things where Aquinas does some really fun stuff with word order that
Mm,
doesn't work in English.
mm,
The last line of the second stanza, nil hoc verbo veritatis verius.
mm,
Nothing is truer than this word of truth, where he
mm.
has the truth and the truer right next to each other.
I love that.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
It reminds me
uh,
of there's I think it's a Christmas hymn, God and Man Made Manifest is one
mm-hmm,
line of it, and
yeah,
it's been changed in some by some people to like God and flesh made man or something, like they changed the word because they want to not make it about
yeah,
men.
right.
But it loses that man made manifest. It
Yeah,
loses
it
that.
loses everything once you take
Yeah.
that out. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Anyway, yeah, just reminded me of that.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. And then the other fun one is usually with the seniors right after Christmas break. We do just one poem from Horace,
Mm.
but it's Ode 111, which is the origination of the phrase "carpe diem." That's where
Mm.
the phrase
Mm-hmm.
comes from in this poem. And I have them write a short essay on it. Carpe diem is this, in English understanding, modern understanding, is a sort of like get it done mentality,
Yeah.
and that's not at all what Horace is talking about. He's
Mm.
talking about the how it's unwise to try and look for your own fate, and to kind of enjoy the moment and good company
Mm.
and good conversation. Um, and so it's a completely different idea, I think, than what most people understand when they hear the phrase
Mm.
carpe diem. So
It's more about being present and less about, going skydiving or something.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, yes,
That's so cool. Yeah.
yeah,
That also, I think about schools saying, what do we need Shakespeare for? It's like, well, because he invented so much of the English language,
mm-hmm,
and
yeah,
you're not going to understand it unless you read it in context first.
yep,
No, that's neat.
yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you for joining me. Any last things you wanna say before we wrap up here?
Well, I hope that that everyone, brushes off whatever little Latin you may have had, or dive deep into it and try and help understand it. If not Latin, uh, read more Chesterton.
Amen. I'll go downstairs and brush off my Aeneid and
There you go.
see what I can do.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you so much again for joining me. This was really great, and hopefully kind of gives people a small window into the Chesterton Academy and what our curriculum is like, and Latin.
Yeah.
It's a great language.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you. It's been wonderful. And thank you all for watching and listening. And if you want to experience more Uncommon Sense, please remember to subscribe, hit that bell button, give us a like, a comment if you want to see more about Chesterton Academies. Let us know in the comments. If you want to hear about something else, let us know in the comments. You are our community, so help us to build that. And once again, thank you so much for joining us, Tom, and everyone else. And please keep listening and sharing, because remember, Chesterton is always better with friends. Thank you, and God bless.